We'll start with a very basic Node.js application. I've already created the application. Let's take a quick look. In my package.json, I used npm init to set up the test app, and I installed Express using npm install and EJS as my Express template engine. In my actual app.js file that's going to be run by Node, I've required Express and set up my Express app. I've set my port to 3000, and I've used app.set to tell Express that I'll be using EJS as my view engine. Then we've set up our static folder. I've gone ahead and used the public folder, which is a standard way to do it, but instead of chosen to say that when an HTTP request requests /assets, then that will actually go and look inside that public folder. Then I've set up my app.get for just the slash, just for that particular route, which is going to render my index page. And then I've told Express to start listening on that port. Going to my view then, in the views folder, index.ejs, I've just got some simple HTML with a title and an empty body. If I go to the public folder, I've made a JS folder with an app.js file, which is where my JavaScript code that the browser will download and run, that the client will download and run, will sit. All right, so that's very basic. So let's add in AngularJS. I've gone over to AngularJS's website, angularjs.org. For this course, we'll be using AngularJS 1. Now, at the recording of this course, Angular 2 is still in production and development and isn't really ready to use in production web applications. And typically, right now, when talking about the mean stack, we're talking about Angular 1. If you go get a job doing mean stack development, that's probably the type of applications you'll be supporting, at least the existing ones. So again, for this course, we'll be using Angular 1. Now, I can click Download, and we'll go ahead and use the CDN, or Content Delivery Network. What that means is I'm going to go out and grab Angular from a different server. And I'm going to go ahead and have my application go out and grab that. The browser will grab this googleapis.com URL. Why is that good? Well, it actually helps my Node server. We won't have as many people requesting and downloading this file from our server. They'll go out and download it from Google. That's also helpful for the speed of the application, because CDNs are designed to be extremely fast for this purpose, and also because if they've used Angular in a different application that also used the CDN, their browser might already have it cached. So that helps us as well. I'm going to grab the uncompressed version versus the minified version. Uncompressed means all the JavaScript code nicely laid out, and minified is an automatic process that removes things like carriage returns, shortens variable names, and other things like that, to make the file as small as possible when downloaded by the browser. In a real production environment, you'll want to use the minified version. But we'll use the uncompressed version, or the development version as it's often called, because it will give us better error messages in the browser. So I'll go ahead, grab this, copy it, and let's go back to our index page. And in the head tag, I'll add a script tag, src equals, and then paste in the URL of AngularJS, the unminified version coming from the CDN. And that's it. At this point, it's good to remind ourselves that we're dealing with the two sides of the client-server process, the browser and the web server, the requests and responses via HTTP, as we've discussed, and the fact that JavaScript is running on both sides. When you begin dealing with something like the mean stack or any other client-side JavaScript, when you're also writing JavaScript in Node, you can start to get confused between the two sides as you're coding. Now, some things will be more obvious, but some things won't. So you need to keep things straight in your head. And so we've actually requested the browser to download some JavaScript and run it with that script tag. And that script tag is sitting inside our EJS file. But it's important to realize that this JavaScript that's being downloaded in this Angular.js file is not being downloaded by Node. It's not being processed by Node in any way. Now, for some of you, that might be obvious, but it's good to start thinking about this when getting used to writing code in Node. If you're also dealing with JavaScript on the client, you need to keep things straight in your head again. So, what's actually happening when we load this? Well, let's go ahead. I'll use nodemon and run app.js. And I'll go to my browser. I'm going to open with F12 the browser tools in Google Chrome. We'll do the same with other browsers as well. Or you could go to your menu for your browser, and there's probably something for developer tools somewhere in the menuing system. But I'll go to localhost :3000, and we can see in the network tab that two things were loaded, the page and that AngularJS file from the CDN. So the HTTP request for the page was processed by Node. And here's the response. Node simply provided the HTML string that the browser then interpreted. And when the browser loaded this HTML string, it saw this script tag, and the only thing that Node did was give us this text for the script tag, return that in the HTTP response, and then the browser saw that it needed to go out and download this JavaScript file. And so we see that second download. And there's AngularJS, which just happens to be a whole bunch of JavaScript, someone else's JavaScript that someone else wrote. Make sense? So Node did not touch this process at all. Now again, that might be obvious, but we're going to see more complex examples of this idea of JavaScript on the server and on the client, mixing and matching and keeping what's straight in our head as we go throughout the rest of the lectures. But for now, we'll just focus on what this Angular.js file, what all that JavaScript code actually lets us do. So let's go back and start using AngularJS.